Pastor Dave, great to be with you. I love the fact that you use Psalm 91 so prolifically, because it is the psalm that gave my wife and I our greatest solace in troubled times.
It's amazing. It's so a part of everything we do that every broadcast we play, we want to pray Psalm 91 for protection on every single one of them. So everything we do, we start with Psalm 91.
Saw that. Anyway,
so what's new with you, Roger?
I think it's a very exciting time to be alive. I must tell you that the recent Supreme Court decision last week, which finally knocked down this idea that some carefully shopped for leftist district judge can issue a sweeping order to affect the entire country, has now been defeated 6-3. I think this was a gift from God, given the fact that several of those Supreme Court justices, sadly, several of them appointed by President Trump, have not been true to the Constitution, have not been true to the nation. But in this case, I think this was a major impediment to the president's America First agenda. As you know, you had district judges ruling that he didn't have the authority to deport dangerous illegal gang members and illegal immigrants, criminals, that he didn't have the authority to negotiate tariff deals with other countries. What we had here was judicial tyranny, an entire branch of government overreaching their authority in the last-ditch effort to stop the president from carrying out the mandate of the last election. I cannot overstate how important this Supreme Court victory was, and it really exposed Justice Brown, who was Ketanji Brown, who was appointed by Joe Biden. You remember her. She's the one who couldn't tell you during her confirmation hearings what a woman was. It's now clear she also doesn't know what the Constitution is. And her opinion was really, this is all just too complicated, which, of course, is her job, to try to cut through that complications and reach a decision. Really disgraceful. But then, Pastor Dave, her appointment was signed with an auto pen, so I'm not even sure she's a real Supreme Court justice.
So I'm glad you brought that up. What does that mean if the auto pen got her in? Is she null and void?
Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, look, I'm not an attorney, but I do think this has to be tested at some point. And perhaps the best way to test this would be for the government to charge somebody who got one of those preemptive pardons that was signed with an auto pen. I don't know, somebody like, maybe Adam Schiff or Dr. Anthony Fauci. He would then argue that he can't be prosecuted because he's been pardoned. That would allow the government to argue, no, your pardon is not valid because it wasn't signed by the President of the United States. And then, although some say, well, Biden will simply say that he authorized the signature, who knows? Biden might say that he's Mahatma Gandhi and he's on Mars. I mean, I don't think the guy knows where he is. It is very clear that he's very, very bitter that his best friends, Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, basically dumped him like a hot potato. And then the people who keep telling us that there are no kings, the people who nominated a candidate for president that not a single Democrat caucus goer or primary voter voted for, they basically anointed a queen. They tell us that there are no kings in America. Well, there is one king. His name is Jesus Christ. Beyond that, there is no king in America. Donald Trump is president, but we overwhelmingly elected him to be president. And it outrages the left that he's just carrying out his constitutional duties and the mandate that the American people voted for. It is a very exciting time to be alive. I think the president had probably the best week yet of his presidency, winning important victories. Now, as you know, the big, beautiful bill which, by the way, no one claims is perfect. I mean, there's a number of things in there that need to be fixed. For example, the prohibition of states to regulate the use of artificial intelligence for 10 years. That has to go either in the Senate bill or in conference between the two houses. This makes no sense. But as someone who has been the victim of artificial intelligence, you can see dozens of videos online where I appear to say things that, Pastor Dave, I never said. In fact, if you look carefully, you never actually see my mouth. It's obscured by a cell phone. But I've seen it done to Obama. I've seen it done to the president. It's very, very dangerous, in my opinion. And the states ought to be able to regulate it.
Yeah, absolutely. You, Roger, are one of the most experts on political and politics back to the times of Nixon. What do you think of the situation with some call it Obamagate and auto pen? How does that compare, in your opinion, to the Watergate?
This is the greatest single dirty trick, the greatest single scandal in American politics, because it is nothing less than an abuse of power in which the full authority of the United States government and the incredible capabilities of our intelligence agencies were utilized using two pieces of evidence that they knew were fabricated, the so-called Steele dossier, which is a claim that Donald Trump, as a private citizen, had cavorted with prostitutes in Moscow in a business visit. Completely false. And the false claim that the Russians hacked the Democrat National Committee and that information was somehow lagged through the Trump campaign to WikiLeaks. No evidence of that either. Completely false. But they knew that when they essentially moved to try to unseat a duly elected president. As my good friend General Flynn, one of the greatest Americans it's ever been my privilege to know, and I've worked for three presidents, I've worked for governors, senators, many members of Congress, but General Flynn, one of the finest, not only thinkers, just geopolitical and military thinkers, but also one of the finest Christian gentlemen I've ever met. And our families have become quite close because we were, of course, tried by the same people in the same courthouse and went through that same trial by fire. But he's absolutely right. He published a list last week of all of those who need to be prosecuted in what I believe is treason. So you can't even argue, oh, they could be prosecuted, but the statute of limitations has run out after 5 years. There is no statute of limitations for treason. What they were engaged in was treasonous. I'm speaking for myself here, but I believe Kash Patel, the FBI director, who I think is a very good man, I think he wants to see them prosecuted. I know that Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, wants to see them prosecuted. When I say them, I'm talking about Joe Biden, Barack Obama, obviously, although he may be immune under that Supreme Court ruling. I'm not certain. But certainly Joe Biden, Susan Rice, FBI Director James Comey, CIA Director.
And we are back with Roger Stone. Roger, we want to get your thoughts on what's going on with the communists and jihadists in New York. Hard to wrap our mind around what's going on in New York City.
It's really quite extraordinary. What you had in the Democrat primary was the rise of this fella, Zoran Mamdani, who actually says white people should be taxed at a higher rate than the rest of us, wants to open the prisons, wants to open Rikers Island, release everybody because he says violence is an abstract construct, whatever that means. Thinks that the grocery stores should be closed down and all food should be controlled and sold by the government, but only to those who have the right card to get into the government-owned grocery store. Thinks that there should be a complete freeze on rents, which means landlords would ultimately not ever be able to maintain or improve their properties, and nobody would invest in new housing or upgraded housing. I mean, it is absolute pure communism. Yet he easily won the Democrat primary, and he now faces a race in the fall where you have a Republican nominee, Curtis Sliwa, who's a radio personality, founder of the Guardian Angels, good man, solid man. You have Eric Adams, the current mayor, who is epically corrupt, and for reasons that I don't quite understand, the administration elected not to prosecute him for that corruption. And you also have former Governor Andrew Cuomo, who led in the polls during the Democrat primary, but then basically failed, but who filed to run as an independent just in case that scenario happened, which of course it did. So the way I'm looking at this is, don't look at this Republican Democrat. That's no longer, I think, the right measure. This is the difference between the crazed progressive left and all people of common sense, Republican, Democrat, independent, non-political. And if three candidates split the vote of those who believe in our fundamental freedoms, New York City could very well get an authoritarian communist mayor who, by the way, dresses this up almost like Donald Trump. In other words, he runs as an outsider, challenging what he sees as a corrupt, crony-dominated system. He's not wrong about that. What's wrong is his prescription. Now, I guess there's two ways to look at this. On the one hand, there's going to be an attempt to consolidate, to either get Curtis Sliwa to drop out and endorse Adams or vice versa. I don't see that happening, quite candidly. And I hate to say this because it does not take into consideration the suffering of the people of New York City. But if this communist, this Muslim communist, who, by the way, opposes Israel and is a proponent for the Palestinian cause and for Islamic extremism, if he becomes mayor and if he's allowed to govern, by the time we have another presidential campaign, I hate to say this, but New York will be on fire. It will be chaos. Just opening the prisons and defunding the police, both of which are in his agenda. On top of all of this economic hardship, businesses will flee. The middle class will flee. The wealthy will certainly flee. I mean, New York City could be, sadly, an example for the whole country in terms of what happens when you embrace communism, atheistic, godless communism.
Absolutely amazing. I've heard that there's some ties to Muslim Brotherhood with him, too, and also that there's possibly a law that President Trump could use because of being a communist. What are your thoughts on that?
I saw
and also Bibi Netanyahu.
I saw reports yesterday that he has ties to the Muslim Brotherhood. Also clear ties to Barack Obama, although I guess that's not really surprising since I think he was the guy pulling the strings during the 4 years of the Biden presidency. There is a 1930s law that would, on first reading, indicate that the president may have the ability to stop his candidacy. I think there should also be an examination of his naturalization papers to see if he dissembled on those. He is, I must say, he's a social media phenomena. So I think he's very, very popular with a lot of younger voters who really don't have a grasp on what he stands for. It's kind of a throwback to Obama's standing for hope and change. I mean, that sounds really good. Hope and change sounds very positive, sounds very uplifting. Of course, it wasn't. So I have to examine the law to see if the president has grounds to stop him from being mayor. It would be incredibly unpopular with his voters. I suspect you would have some civil unrest over it. That has to be taken into consideration. I mean, look, Tom Homan is already struggling. He's doing an amazing job trying to deport as many illegals as possible. Eric Adams, the current mayor, is a poseur. This idea that he was prosecuted because he opposed Biden's open borders policy is just false. His only complaint was that the federal government didn't give him the millions of dollars to pay for the problem that they had created. Adams located these shelters for illegal immigrants in some of the most stable working class neighborhoods in the city. In one case, he actually put one of the migrant shelters in a building where there was no plumbing. So they're using outdoor porta potties next to a Catholic girls' school in Staten Island, which to me seems quite unwise. Or you have the example where we locate the migrants at the Roosevelt Hotel in Manhattan at $500 a night per room. This is a national landmarked hotel. Instead of an ice bed in Texas for $27. Eric Adams is now repositioned himself as if he was an opponent to open borders, which of course he never was. And then, if I have to, I will remind people of his actual crimes. He took $100,000 from Turkey. That's illegal. He let the Turks have an occupancy permit for a building in Manhattan that was not up to code. Would have cost them millions to bring it up to code. He laundered that money through New York City residents, and then he submitted it to the city's 8-to-1 campaign finance matching program. So he turned $100,000 into $800,000. There are 3 additional sealed indictments against Mayor Adams, sealed for reasons of national security, which means it's likely that he did this 4 times with other foreign money. He's now trying to reposition himself as somehow against the open borders policy, but history does not record it that way.
Well, yeah, we heard Tom Homan this week said that he would triple down, quadruple down if this mayor became elected and stopped ICE. And also, this mayor to be, we hope not, claimed that he would arrest Benjamin Netanyahu if he's in New York. What a catastrophe that would be.
Yeah, I saw that. Look, I think at least the guy he did a pretty good job of concealing who he really is. But I think that is now becoming much clearer to the people. This is a potential disaster, but it really shows you what's happened in the Democrat Party. The old Democrat Party of John F. Kennedy, of Harry Truman, who really is the founder of the state of Israel. The Democrat Party that was pro-capitalist, pro-free enterprise. The Democrat Party that believed in God, that believed in a strong national defense. That Democrat Party no longer exists, just does not exist. This is now the party of AOC, the party of Jasmine Crockett, the party of Zoran Mamdani, the party of Bernie Sanders. I find this guy hysterical. Bernie Sanders and his wife skimmed millions of dollars out of his 2 presidential campaigns in media placement fees. Now, that's not illegal, but he never told his donors that he was enriching himself this way. You notice how Bernie used to criticize billionaires and millionaires? Now he just criticizes billionaires because Bernie is now a millionaire. So Bernie likes socialism for you. He just doesn't like socialism for himself.
Exactly. And just a little time we have left, Roger, what are your thoughts about midterms? How do the Republicans sit to keep the House and the Senate?
Much, much, much too early to say. Look, it's crucial that we pass the big, beautiful bill because it has the largest tax cut in American history that has to be extended. Or look at it the other way around. If it is not passed, we will have a 68% increase in federal taxes. That would be a disaster. The Federal Reserve needs to cut interest rates. Bill Pulte, the director of the Federal Housing Finance Administration, has been very articulate about this, as has the Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, as well as the president himself. If you get that tax cut, if you get that rate cut, then I think and we make these tariff deals, which is coming along nicely, we will have a boom economy by 2026, and I predict we gain seats.
Yeah, absolutely. What does the president have to do to get Powell to make a move? Does he have any?
Well, I don't think he can fire him. Again, I'm not an attorney, but that's my reading of it. I think he is jawboning him as best he can. There's news story today that Powell may have perjured himself in some of his testimony to Congress. Now, this guy should just either cut rates or quit. Let me point out, interest rates, the inflation rate was lower than it is today. Probably was higher, but lower than it is today when he cut rates to benefit Joe Biden. So if he could cut rates then to try to affect the election, why can he not cut rates on the American people today?